This is WAB's Week in Review, the show where we look back the last few days of stories from your WAB News team. I'm Alex Helmick, managing editor of WAB News, and we start with a local look at the federal shutdown. The union representing Transportation Security Administration workers says the federal shutdown is taking a toll on staff at Atlanta's Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport, the world's busiest, which sees around 275,000 passengers a day. Lily Oppenheimer had more.
TSA agents are among the federal workers who will not get paid during the shutdown. Once it's over, they'll receive back pay. But in the meantime, local union representative Aaron Barker says many were already struggling to pay their bills, even working other part-time jobs.
Congressional members still get their pay. I don't think that that's fair. For you to still receive a paycheck and the person who's out on the front line actually doing the work to be held in limbo and moved around and their benefits, everything is being played with, that it feels like we're pawns.
TSA officials warn an extended shutdown could mean longer wait times at airports. Meanwhile, leaders with the Airline Pilots Association also warn the shutdown could cause staffing shortages and communication issues in air traffic control. Lily Oppenheimer, WABE News.
Well, with about 2 months left in hurricane season, Georgia has so far escaped any significant threat. But the government shutdown could complicate how the feds respond if Georgia's luck were to run out. WAB's Melissa Fado explained.
Most of the nitty-gritty of emergency response happens close to home, says Claire Knox, professor at the University of Central Florida's School of Public Administration.
FEMA is about coordination. Every disaster begins and ends locally.
But local governments can quickly hit their capacity, says Professor Jennifer Trivedi with the Disaster Research Center at the University of Delaware.
And that's where FEMA comes in, or having these mutual aid agreements between states become really critical because it allows for a larger response to happen than any one location or any one state can bring to bear.
As of May, FEMA has provided survivors of Hurricane Helene in Georgia more than $500 million in assistance and low-interest loans. Another $541 million in promised direct aid is caught up in red tape. Knox says many federal weather forecasters and FEMA employees are exempt from the shutdown. But the Trump administration wants to shrink FEMA. Knox says if that happens, states will have to fill the gap. Some will go above and beyond, but
some states are only going to focus in on just the response component and forego preparedness, mitigation, and recovery,
which she says could lead to massive inconsistencies. Melissa Fato, WABE News.
Some critical federal health services, including Medicare, Medicaid, and VA healthcare, continue in Georgia as the government shutdown is underway. WAB's Jess Mador reported on the contingency plans of some of those agencies.
At the U.S. Centers for Disease Control, disease outbreak monitoring and response to emergencies continue, but officials say the CDC is suspending public health communications and guidance for state and local health departments. The Food and Drug Administration can still respond to foodborne illness outbreaks. Veteran health care and benefit processing continues, as do some programs including suicide prevention and veteran homeless services. Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, disability, and children's health insurance payments continue. Nationwide, the Department of Health and Human Services has already furloughed more than 32,000 workers. Jess Mador, WABE News.
Changing gears now, international students in Georgia could see limits to the amount of time they can stay in the U.S. with F1 visas. WAB's Mei Shu had more.
A proposed rule from the Department of Homeland Security would cap foreign student visas at 4 years. Currently, international students with F1 visas are allowed to stay for enough time to complete their degree programs. If the rule is finalized, students with programs lasting longer than 4 years would have to apply for an extension. The Trump administration says this will prevent quote-unquote perpetual students from engaging in visa abuse. Charles Cook, an immigration attorney based in Atlanta, says international students often pay very high tuition rates, which keeps rates down for American students.
These are not perpetual students. These are individuals moving their careers forward and moving our society forward. It's when you think about it, it really makes no sense unless you look at it from the point of view that they just don't want foreign students in the United States.
For current international students, Cook encourages ramping up credits now.
I would also tell those that are thinking about coming to the United States that perhaps they want to consider education elsewhere, at least for the next 3.5 years.
The public comment period for this proposed rule will be over by the end of today. The DHS will then review comments and submit a final rule for review by the Office of Management and Budget. Mei Shu, WABE News.
Barrow County school officials worry certain students are being unfairly labeled as threats. As WABE's Shemaine Cruz reported, this comes after police agencies started being required to report any time a student threatens to harm someone else at school.
The mandate is part of House Bill 268, which was passed after a 14-year-old student allegedly killed 4 people in a shooting at Appalachia High School last year. Authorities say the teen had previously been investigated for making threats online, but that there was no probable cause for an arrest. It's also been reported that the Barrow County school system wasn't properly notified about the incident before he transferred there. Since the new law took effect, Deputy Superintendent Matt Thompson says they've had 81 official student-police encounters, 7 of which have resulted in charges.
Many of these are students who are 7, 8 years old, saying very, very dumb things.
That's Thompson speaking with lawmakers earlier this week.
So we are being very careful to make sure that every official encounter we get, that will follow the student if they were to transfer. But in some cases, that goes back to a problem that came up during some of the hearing, which is things following students that parents may be uncomfortable with. That's a real challenge.
Thompson suggests raising the minimum age for these encounters to 10 or 12 and taking into consideration a student's cognitive ability. Shemaine Cruz, WABE News.
An Atlanta nonprofit supporting entrepreneurs with disabilities is expanding in the face of federal cuts to programs that assist the community. WABE's Marlon Hyde had more.
This is DeShaman Solomon performing his song, Silenced. He's a blind R&B singer who founded his own media company.
Being a disabled entrepreneur, it's so hard to get funding. It's really hard.
That's where Synergy's work stepped in to help Solomon and people like him start their own businesses. Solomon says sweeping changes to federal laws and policies enacted under this current administration have impacted disability rights and services. Synergy's work is now providing direct funding for its entrepreneurs. Arti Sehgal is the founder and CEO.
This year, we launched Synergy Seed Fund. This is the first non-depository loan fund, or a CDFI, solely focused on founders with disabilities.
The individuals she serves often face extra barriers in their career. Maria Town is the president and CEO of the American Association of People with Disabilities.
One of the most frequent reasons people with disabilities cite for not becoming entrepreneurs or not working in startups is because of our consistent need for healthcare.
According to the Center for American Progress and Independent Policy Institute, recent federal actions have especially threatened the community's access to Medicaid. Sehgal says disabled entrepreneurs are going to continue to need assistance as future funding remains uncertain.
So when we invest here in the disability innovation, all of us prosper from that. And that's what entrepreneurs with disabilities do every single day.
In partnership with the Georgia Department of Behavioral Health and Developmental Disabilities, Synergy's work is launching a fall business accelerator for entrepreneurs this year. Marlon Hyde, WABE News.
Coastal Georgia residents will get to vote on a controversial zoning change for a historic Gullah-Geechee community on Sapelo Island. Advocates are celebrating this as a win for a community with deep, rich history. WABE's Emily Jones talked with WABE's Jim Burris about the ruling and started with where the issue all began.
Sapelo is a small barrier island off of McIntosh County, which is a little bit south of Savannah, and it's only accessible by ferry. So this is sort of a tiny remote island. And we're specifically talking about Hog Hummock, which is a Gullah-Geechee community where the descendants of formerly enslaved people from West Africa have lived for generations. And back in 2023, McIntosh County passed a zoning change to essentially double the size of homes that you're allowed to build in Hog Hummock. And this immediately upset residents. They are worried that bigger houses will drive up property taxes, could pave the way for more development, and could ultimately turn this historic community into a place where they can no longer afford to live.
So how did this community fight back?
Well, they turned to a little used provision in the state constitution called Home Rule, which says that residents can overturn a decision of their county government if enough registered voters sign a petition calling for a referendum. So they got all the required signatures, a county probate court judge authorized the signatures and the vote, and voting actually started in a special election on this zoning issue.
All right, well, if this election was already moving forward, how did the state Supreme Court get involved?
The county felt that the referendum wasn't legal, so they challenged it. They argued that the home rule provision in the Constitution doesn't apply to zoning issues, and a Superior Court judge in McIntosh County agreed. He called off the vote, but he also blocked the zoning change from going into effect while this issue was still working its way through the courts. So the residents then appealed, and the state Supreme Court has now unanimously sided with the residents.
What now? I mean, you mentioned voting had already started. What happens to those votes and to the zoning change?
So that is a much tougher question. The Supreme Court did uphold the injunction on the zoning rules, so that still can't be enforced until this election and this sort of whole issue gets played out. But it's not actually clear in the ruling or to the advocates that I spoke to what happens to the 800 or so ballots that were already cast before the election was stopped. Nor has a date been set for the referendum to resume. So the Supreme Court has said the vote can move forward, but exactly how and when that's going to happen is still a bit up in the air.
That was WABE's Emily Jones and Jim Burris. For more on this story and many others, go to WABE.org. You're listening to WABE's Week in Review with me, Alex Helmick. Atlanta Public Schools has launched a new text message hotline to help students work through mental and emotional challenges they may be experiencing. WABE's Julian Virgin explained.
Navigating high school has its challenges, says Emery Arnold Jr.
We care too much about what other people think rather than what we think.
Arnold is a senior at Booker T. Washington High School and a member of Atlanta Public Schools Student Advisory Council.
Social media plays a big role. TikTok, Instagram, it shows a lifestyle that's not really truly obtainable, and you try to get that lifestyle. They flex a little pay, it's a whole bunch going on. So taking all that in, it messes with your brain.
They have access to everything at their fingertips at any given time or day.
Dr. Karina Wyndham is the director of the Office of Equity and Social Justice at Atlanta Public Schools.
What we want to do as the adults in their lives is to make sure that they have access to help at any given time of day as well. Exactly.
That's why APS is sponsoring Talk It Out, a free, confidential text line only for students grades 6 through 12. APS says it's a preventative service and not meant for a crisis. However, whether students are feeling sad, anxious, or just need someone to listen, they've made licensed mental health counselors available 24/7.
I've seen the effects of mental health crises untreated.
Layla Shannon is a senior at Drew Charter High School and chair of the Student Advisory Council. She says a fellow student recently died by suicide. Her message to her classmates is,
it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay, because at the end of the day, the world won't end because of your problems, but your world will end if you let those problems continue.
Julian Virgin, WABE News.
And if you or someone you know is struggling, you can call or text the National Suicide and Crisis Lifeline at 988. And as a note of disclosure, Atlanta Public Schools holds WABE's broadcast license. As of the last U.S. Census, there were just over 1,700 people who were age 100 or older living in the state of Georgia. WABE's Molly Samuel had more on a new report from the Census Bureau on the country's oldest residents.
In 2020, out of Georgia's 10.7 million people, 1,737 of them were centenarians. That's 1.6 out of every 10,000 Georgia residents. Nationwide, there were more than 80,000 people aged 100 or above, about 2 per every 10,000 people. The state with the highest proportion of centenarians was Hawaii. According to the census, the 100 and above population saw a lot of growth between the 2010 and 2020 counts. Still, centenarians are a pretty tiny part of the overall population. Molly Samuel, WABE News.
And finally, today, the state of Georgia is celebrating a conservation milestone for the gopher tortoise. WAB's Marissa Mecki reported the story.
The Georgia Department of Natural Resources says that partners in the Georgia Gopher Tortoise Initiative have officially protected 65 viable tortoise populations. Matt Elliott with the Georgia DNR says that means
one that would persist, roughly 100 years into the future. 3 generations of gopher tortoises.
He says the DNR found Georgia needs 250 adult tortoises living in the sandier, flat coastal plains of Georgia to meet that threshold. Elliott says in states west of Georgia, like Alabama, Mississippi, and Louisiana, the gopher tortoises are federally listed as threatened. But here, conservation has bolstered their numbers to keep them off the list. He says the state has been purchasing lands and partnering with private landowners to put their land into conservation easements to create large, contiguous, and protected habitats for the tortoises to thrive. And that's important because
they're what we call a keystone species.
The tortoises aren't just a rich part of Georgia's coastal plains heritage. Their burrows play a huge role in the environment.
These burrows are a refugia for a lot of other creatures. I think there's something like over 300 species that have been documented residing inside of gopher tortoise burrows,
including the eastern indigo snake and gopher frog. And
it's also kind of an umbrella species.
Elliott says the habitat these tortoises live in house lots of rare and declining species, and by protecting the tortoises, Georgia is protecting a much larger wealth of native biodiversity. Marissa Mecki, WABE News.
That's all for the show this week. My thanks to the WABE News team for all the great work. I'm Alex Helmick. Thank you for supporting WABE and for listening to the Week in Review.